really awesome drill done. It's a popular kettlebell drill. It's a popular drill, yet it's often still done incorrectly. Now, what I want you guys to think of more than anything, before I show you weight or my arm or what we're doing with the extremities, is what we're having at the hip done. It's a popular kettlebell drill. What I'm going to get into is the windmill. Really awesome drill done. It's a popular kettlebell drill. It's a popular drill, yet it's often still done incorrectly. Now, what I want you guys to think of more than anything, before I show you weight or my arm or what we're doing with the extremities, is what we're happening at the hip and the core. So what we want to do is keep our plank. So how we set our feet is very important. We want to turn our feet to the side where the weight would be either above my head or pointing this direction if the weight was down below. I'll show you some different progressions. This is a hip hinge. It's a frontal plane hip hinge. So a lot of people, they want to make it more like a yoga triangle, and they come out and down. So my stance doesn't need to be much wider than about my deadlift position. So if I took my deadlift position and just turned my feet about 45 degrees, I'd have my correct foot position for the windmill. Now, when I'm going back, I'm going to keep the inside leg straight, but I can bend that other leg. Now, when I do this, this allows me to get more and more into my hip. And what you should feel is a lot of the lateral hamstring, you'll feel the obliques into that movement. Now, just getting into that movement can be kind of hard. So what you can do, we can take a band, and simply by giving some tactile feedback, if I get around into the band here, not necessarily gracefully done there, but if you have someone who really doesn't have good proprioception, you put the band around their hips, get them in that position, and before we just load, we allow the band to start traction them into that position. While I'm doing this, because the weight's pulling me back, I'm grabbing the ground with my feet, and you can see I can start getting the idea of where I want my hips to go. And when I come up, I push through my feet, and that's going to be really key. When you're coming out of the position, push through your feet to come nice and tall, just like you would, I don't know, like a deadlift. So a lot of the similar concepts are going to apply. So a nice sort of segue. So when the band's here, I got pushed through my feet to extend my hips. I come into the movement in that frontal plane. I go where my mobility allows for. I push through my feet, come back up. A really nice way sort of to teach that concept, because a lot of your clients, and some fitness professionals as well, don't understand where they're going in the windmill. So once we've established that pattern out to the side, and that could be a great mobility drill, sort of like a warm-up series, is we're going to start in the kettlebell in the low position. When we do that, it's great because if you do have existing shoulder issues, or you just don't comfortably stabilize the weight overhead, this can help start getting us the pattern. The pattern is that spiral line, the ground, lateral hamstring, lat, obliques. We're going to have that connection. All the things that greatly impact our shoulder. Now, I put a kettlebell on a yoga block, which is a great thing to do for all your clients, because if you start them off the floor, they're going to think they have to go to the floor. And remember, we don't want any trunk flexion or really rotation. So elevating the implement is great because it gives some feedback upon to your client where they want to go. So if I kick my hip back, I grab on the bell. I want to clench it really tightly. If I clench it really tightly, it activates that lat. That lat will give me some more core stability. Now, just like my deadlift, I can put my hand behind my back or up. It's not really important. I'm just going to put my hip right now. Grab. I'm going to push on my feet just like my deadlift. And my hip comes forward. So it's my frontal plane deadlift. Slide down my body. Keep the weight close. But where did my weight go? The weight of my body went back on this hip. Squeeze my hands. Squeeze my feet. Nice and tall. Okay? And really friendly way to introduce that drill to get that hip oblique complex to work together. So what I want you to understand is a lot of shoulder issues can be an inability to fire off that hip and oblique complex that will compromise that shoulder stability and integrity. What Dr. McGill talks about with the proximal stability, distal mobility, PNF, Gray Cook, all this stuff relates that you have to have those segments working together. Don't be afraid to build specific strength in that position. So again, we can use load and volume as a means to progress people. Eventually, if you have good mobility and you've established it's safe, we can take the weight overhead. Now, when the weight comes overhead, a couple of things. I want that elbow locked. So my arm is staying vertical the entire time. I cue people, I'm not moving my arm, I'm moving away from my arm. So my arm actually doesn't change its position the entire movement. It's handy to look up at the bell slightly to get a sense of where you are. You want to keep a neutral wrist. You want to tightly squeeze to, again, activate that chain. And I'm actively grabbing the ground with my feet. I sort of just get to that point where I feel that hip highly loaded, squeeze the bell, pushing my feet, nice and tall. That's a wonderful drill to sort of stimulate those fascial lines and those connections. The final version would be combining them. Okay, so again, if you're a little iffy in the shoulder complex, you're not feeling like more load is necessarily the answer, we can stress the pattern by now loading both arms. So if I get the kettlebell up in position, I'm going to get myself set first. Okay, bell up, slide down. Okay, I feel where I'm at, bell in hand, pull through, nice and tall. So if I feel like I need to reposition, I can. Slide down, and I use a little feedback, hold, squeeze, 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 drive through my feet. When you drive through the feet, you don't feel like you're lifting with your back or your shoulder, you're actually lifting with your hips, right? So, several ways to use the windmill. It also is a wonderful way to sort of build confidence for your get up, because there is that transitional point where they get up that you're going to need to sort of basically do a windmill when you're transitioning from that knee sweep up into that lunge.